Have Steve Schaub here with us today. Steve came to visit one afternoon and said, "Oh, wow, isn't this a good space? I could do something with this space." And very fortunately for us, we have had this tremendous photographic print exhibition up and focused very much on the Grand Central Terminal. Stephen is talking with us about doing a book. The Artist Book Foundation uses this space primarily to show the work of artists whose books we publish. And that's why we feel very fortunate to be in this space. So you all have to stay tuned. There will be a book coming. And I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity before this show comes down to have Steve talk to us about his process. We're very dedicated to working with the artists. We collaborate with the artists. It's the most important part of what we get to do, especially with the living artists. Obviously you can't do it with a dead artist, but with the living artists, the publication is very much not only their visual presentation, but also we hear their voice. And that's what I think is so important about what's going on in this day and age with cameras, with digital, with artists' interpretations of what they can do. And I think this particular artist really pushes the envelope and looks for the most innovative way to express whatever's on your mind, wherever you are, what's ever going on. So without further ado, Steve Schaub, and please let him take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming out today. And what I thought I would do is give a little bit of background as to who I am and what I've done and about my work. And then we can go around and talk about the different pieces, and we can end. I brought a selection of some unique one-of-a-kind cameras with me that I've had made for me specifically for the creations of my work. So I've been a working artist for the last 30 years. Prior to getting into art, I was in the Marine Corps. Surprise. Served in the Desert Shield, Desert Storm, different life. I was a nuclear, biological, and chemical defense specialist. And I was applying to go to art school because I decided that career in the military had to end. It was too dangerous. And I wanted to become an artist. And since then, I was passionate about photography. I discovered my love of photography over the course of a weekend. On a Friday afternoon, I went out, bought myself an inexpensive camera, and said, I should really photograph the places that I'm visiting. And by Monday morning, I took a $10,000 loan out, bought a professional camera, and threw myself at it face first. And just knew that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I applied to RIT. I have a BFA in Photographic Arts and Sciences from the Rochester Institute of Technology, which is also where I met my beautiful wife, muse and partner in life. And we moved to Vermont 21 years ago. When I first came to Vermont, I was a classic darkroom photographer. I was a master printer for Berger in France. I used to do work with Time Life, consulting to photographers all across the United States and stuff on darkroom printing technologies. In 2004, maybe 2003, I had sort of this awakening that what I was doing wasn't really going to get me where I wanted to go. And over the course of 3 days again, I completely threw everything out the window. And my wife remembered this. I went out and bought like this cheap plastic Chinese camera, and I had a Dremel tool and a glue gun, and kind of made my own Polaroid camera. And I bought a cheap scanner, and it all just sort of came together. But I was terrified, because I was walking away from everything that I had known. And that became a book. It was a show in Paris in 2004. And it was a fun process. But since then, my work has been primarily done on rare and handmade papers. All of my work is a one-of-a-kind. I do not do editions. And for the last couple of years, I've been doing what I refer to as an unresolved narrative. It's sort of the theme of my work. It's the start of a story. It's the start of an idea, and the viewer then fills in the rest. The works are multiple exposures, in some cases as many as 100 different images, all on one negative. I only work in film, I don't work digitally. In terms of the capture, I do print digitally, but I shoot everything on film. And specifically, I work in a lot of motion picture films because they have a unique look and a unique ability for my work. So this particular piece, I'll talk about this one first, Grand Central Terminal. Was one of the most difficult pieces I've probably ever done, because anybody who's ever been in Grand Central knows that it's crazy, and there's a lot of people going around, and I'm trying to create this artwork. And my wife and my daughters have always been the models in my work for the last
Forever.
2000, forever. Last year I counted, she posed for, I think it was 13,000 test images last year. And they could be test images like, I know you're sleeping. Oh, you're perfect. You know, and I'm just trying something. I'm constantly trying to push the envelope in the way that I make my work and the materials that I bring to make my work. There's an awful lot of failure. I mean, I fail constantly, and I fail magnificently. If you're gonna fail all at 100%. But when it works, it comes together. So this particular piece is made on Japanese ginwashi. Ginwashi translates as golden paper. It's a Japanese kozo that has golden manila hemp fiber ceramically embedded in the surface. It's actually fireproof. It's not meant for printing. I've invented ways of working on some of these rare materials. And this process gets into what I refer to as motion pictures. It's a multiple exposure, but it's also 4 different negatives overlapping in the camera. So occasionally you'll see these lines that are going up. That's sort of reminiscent to me of like a flicker of a motion picture camera. And a lot of this also goes into sort of the fragmentation of memory and time that I'm fascinated by. So in this particular piece, I remember when we were making it, it was so crazy. And I built these first 2 pieces, it's all handheld. And I'm here with Eve, who's the model of the piece, and I'm waiting for this moment to happen. And of course, there's always people. And we stood there for probably 25 minutes, maybe more.
I think more.
Yeah. And people kept standing between us and they're looking at me, what are you doing? I'm going, I need 5 seconds so I can have her in the frame. But once again, building the scene, building the light, watching the movement, and being very responsive. The pieces are non-linear as well. And a lot of the pieces, they'll feel like it's something that you know in a space that you've seen, but it's actually not connected. If you were in the space, you would see whole areas that were left out. So I'm very edited when I work. Sometimes it's more important to leave stuff out than put stuff in. And so this was one of the largest pieces I had made up until recently. And I print on what's called a Da Vinci printer. There's only one Da Vinci printer in the world. It's a 12 black carbon printer. It's the most archival black and white printing process ever developed. It takes forever. This is like a 26-hour print. And that's also why I only make one of a kind, because it would kill me making 2. So let's continue moving on. And we'll talk about this piece. For the last couple of years, I've been obsessed with this particular paper. The paper's called amate. Amate's been made for 3,000 years. It predates the Mayans and the Aztecs. Amate is made out of 3 different tree barks that are boiled down, laid on a stone slab, pounded together, and then dried in the sun. It's the most primitive paper making process you can imagine. But it's fabulous to work on, and also maddening to work on, because each piece is unique. There's no consistency from piece to piece. The paper is still used today for shamanistic purposes. And the white paper that I work on, this is the white as the paper comes, is also considered like a purity. It's a very healing sort of material for them. This is made in Grand Central as well. And I was working, it's funny, this one's kind of great because it has you and Ilsa in it.
Yes.
Which I love. It's kind of a family affair going on here today. So this is my wife, once again, model extraordinaire, and my daughter Ilsa, who's here as well. And we were standing in the room, and I'm just building the scene and watching people coming up and down stairs, asking Ilsa to move down the stairs, watching these young girls who were kind of curious what I was doing the whole time, building this image. And that's really what it is. And there are pieces from here, these lines that you're seeing are from Bryant Park. The brickwork that you're seeing here is actually from my hotel room, looking out. So I spend an entire day sometimes making one negative. I've taken sometimes as much as a week to build one negative that may have 100, 200 different images all on that one piece of film, and you don't know if you've got it. There's that, once again, that failure, that experimentation, and you kind of have to just let it go and you make the work, and hopefully it works out. So this was, once again, from Grand Central Terminal. The next piece here was a dangerous piece of work. This is from the Brooklyn Bridge, and also down on Madison Avenue. And this is kind of fun because it's one of the only pieces I think I've ever made that I had my wife, I have Ilsa, and I have my daughter Brett, all in the same scene. We were at the Brooklyn Bridge for the day, and I loved the sense of movement. I loved the lines of the bridge and how they felt with the lines of the building. And the lenses that I work with are very, very, very wide angle, like extremely wide angle. The camera that I'm holding here is a wide lux, and it has a 140-degree angle of view. So it's human vision with your peripheries. So you really get a sense of space and depth within the scene. The scary part about this one is anybody who's ever walked on the Brooklyn Bridge, beyond the fact that there's a lot of people, there's these crazy people on bicycles. And they totally don't care if you're in the way or not. And I almost got killed about 6 times in the process of making these things. These guys kept knocking me, which is annoying. But once again, I like when I'm bringing together different locations and make it feel familiar, yet at the same time, it doesn't quite fit. It's that sort of a logic of a dream, is the way I refer to a lot of the work. And the last piece, way down here, we all have to go to the other room now. This was actually one of the very first pieces in this series. I was in New York and I had this idea, and this is called Figures on 44th, once again, my daughter Ilsa, and she's got this very sort of cubistic thing going on with the way she's moving. And I was talking to her. I mean, I very much work kind of like a director in a movie. I say, step a little forward, move a little to the right. We're having this sort of dialogue back and forth. But I also always allow my subject to sort of be who they are. You know, it's wonderful. I love being a dad. I love having 2 daughters. And I love the fact that they were 5 years apart. Because there's a very big difference between being 14 and being 18, or being, 7 and being 11. And so a lot of times when I'm working with Ilsa, I'll say, how would you be? And I mean her at that age, because I can't project myself into that. And that starts coming through in some of the pieces. This was some of the very first ones that I ever made in the series, but what I loved was all the different things that start to come into the piece. The hands, the one way, the walking symbols, and it has that sense of motion of being on 44. It's there, but it's fragmented. Once again, the fragmentation of time, which I've been fascinated about since 2004. My father passed away. I got thinking about memory and how, in a very short period of time after someone's gone, you don't remember stuff correctly. And there's, gaps start happening. And that's what a lot of these pieces are about. It's sort of those all coming together and to tell that final story. I brought a couple cameras with me as well today to show today. I'm sort of obsessed about making my own cameras. One of the things about my process is that none of the information and the technologies exist to make this work. So in order to process my films, for instance, I process it in instant coffee. Instant coffee and vitamin C powder, Armour's Hammer washing soda. I've come up with my own developer that is not only environmentally stable, but at the same time, it allows me to be able to create these works. So I brought 4 different cameras in addition to the wide lux that I thought I would share. The first one, this is a Linhof 6x12. This is what all the work in this room is made on. Linhof is the oldest continuing produced camera company in the world. They're handmade in Germany. It's die cast. It's an absolute tank to carry around. But it's beautiful, and it's a real gem to be able to work with in terms of tools. The next piece is a pinhole camera that I had CNC machined for me. This is called the orthotoposcope. And the pinhole on the turret here, it has all these different options for pinholes, from zone place to different sizes to photon seeds. Each one renders the image a little bit differently. But this is extremely wide angle. If I were taking a picture of you, from right here, I would have between your feet, the ceiling, all the way over there, and all the way over here. If you can't, Robert Kaplan was once quoted as saying that if your photographs aren't good enough, you're not close enough. With my cameras, if you can't touch your subject, you're probably too far away. You really have to be on top of the people. There's no viewfinder. These red dots represent the angle of view. So that's that side, that's that side. You simply hold the camera and hold the button. Exposures range anywhere from a second. I've handheld images out to 10 minutes. And you're just there breathing the whole time. So my breath and my movement become part of the piece, which I love. I never use a tripod. I like moving with my work. The next camera here is a Polaroid Pathfinder camera that I had modified. They no longer make the materials for this film, for this camera, so I had a Fuji Instax Polaroid back mounted on it. Yes, it is in red crocodile, because, I don't know, I wanted the red crocodile skin. It just looked great. And we took a little test fun image when we came in. This was part of a color series that I did in New York City a few years back.
Wait, take an image now with
What?
Take an image now.
Wait a minute. I'll take your picture, Evil.
You're always taking my picture.
And then, hold on a second here. Let's see if this one. And there's your picture.
Ta-da!
And in about a minute we'll be able to see it. And then the last camera That's a fun one. I had this made for me a couple of years ago. This is a 1943 graphics camera that was a 3 1/4, 4 1/4 camera. They originally were in black leather, but I had all the leather removed and I had the Honduras mahogany polished because it was just so pretty. I had custom Japanese red silk bellows created for the camera. It's a 4x5 inch camera, so a big negative. And the lens is actually an Aero Ektar 178mm lens, which was created by Eastman Kodak. This is from a B-17 bomber from World War II. But it's fun to work with, it's extremely fast, and it has a visual quality that I can't get any other way. And that's sort of why I make these cameras. I start with, I want to make this work. This is an idea. How do I get there? And usually it's finding the materials that I want to work with, seeing if there's a camera that I have or one that I can retrofit to work for that purpose, and then just seeing where it goes from there. When I first started printing on handmade papers, like for instance the, I don't have any here, but Japanese Gampi was one of the very, was one of the very first papers I ever printed on. And it took me almost a year to figure out how to print on that particular paper. And for a long time ago, I used to print for other artists as well. And I was doing some work with Zana Brisky, who did Born in Brothels. And I was printing some of her huge mural scale pieces that Alvagami Mills had made for her. And she wanted to print on this decollage. And once again, it took like 6 months to figure out how to print on a decollage. I always seem to find, I like the challenge of how I'm going to make the work. It's very important to me. And as my wife will tell you, the moment it becomes too easy for me,
You move on.
I move on. Sometimes too quickly. She gets very upset.
You spent all this time on this. Do it for a
I don't
while.
like to feel that I'm in control of the process. I try to always make the process as random and as difficult, as uncontrollable as possible, because I find that in that I make the best work. When I can predict and know what I'm going to get, I don't like it. That's what I got. Any questions?
Question, why did you choose that kind of paper to work on?
Which one?
Which either to Japanese?
Oh, sure. I import papers from Bhutan, Nepal, South America, Europe. I mean, I have papers from everywhere. I work with National Living Treasures in Japan. And to me, the paper is it's a gut instinct of what's going to feel right, what scale I want to work at. It's also, it's difficult sometimes because I'll find a particular paper that I like and I'll work on it, and then the paper maybe will die and I can't get the paper anymore. That's happened to me several times. And I generally speaking find I love raw, organic, handmade sheets because it brings, I like where the image and the paper blur and the paper becomes part of the image and you really can't always see that distinction. That to me is really important. And it's one of the reasons I sort of don't work on just a white sheet of paper. I also love the randomness. You know, when you're making a big print that's 16 feet wide, or I just made one 2 days ago that's 20 feet wide. When you're making a 20-foot artwork, you have no idea how stuff is going to lay out by the time you get down there. Even with my best of abilities, I'll take a mate, and I'll have like 50 sheets of a mate in my studio. And I'll find the right piece, I think, for the artwork that I'm going to make. But where everything's going to come together, at a certain point, you kind of just have to hit print, and hope for the best, because it's a very long process.
So you never do any trial runs of your negative on any less,
I don't believe in test prints.
It misses the point, I guess.
I never make
It's
test
like
prints.
a once-off, and it's either going to work or it's not.
Yes, I work like a jazz musician. I also never go back to my files. So when I start, my friends who are like what I consider like real photographers who do like photographs all the time, they come and they watch me in Photoshop and they laugh because I use like 5 tools. I use the same tools in Photoshop that I use in Darken. I darken, I lighten, I adjust contrast. That's pretty much about it. I try to do everything in camera if I can on the piece of film. So when I start an image, I believe in working at what I refer to as the speed of thought. So I'm always trying to work and undo. I don't use layers. I don't do anything that I can never go back to. It's what you see is what you get. What you see is what you get. And after 30, 40 minutes, I know if the image is there or not. But I never go back to it. I'll never revisit it. I'll never redo a scan. It has to be like that improv experience. Same thing is true with print. When I'm going to make a print, I set up, I'm ready to go, and that's it. That's the one time and the only time I'll make the piece.
When you print on all the different mediums, will they all accept the printing? Do any not accept it? I mean, you get this great piece that comes out and it rubs right off.
It's hard. Gin wash, because it's ceramically coated, after printing the piece, I heat the paper to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, and it causes the pigment to instantly outgas into the paper, and then the surface of all of my prints have multiple coats of non-yellowing, non-cracking, UV flexible varnish on the surface, which my wife has been telling me I need to get a spray booth for because it is slowly killing me. Because they're so big I have to spray them in the studio. And I come in and she's like, "You've been spraying again."
Yeah.
I'm like, I know, that's so bad. But it's I've never had a paper I couldn't get to work. Some are really tricky and take a long time to figure out. You know, like the Japanese Gampi was the worst.
Yeah, so it's just like, wow, that's great. And it just,
Yeah. Well, in the heating and allowing it more time to dry, you know. And when I print, because the Da Vinci printer, I have total control over the way it works. And it prints so slowly. Think of like painting a house, where you put multiple coats on. I'm printing each line, and a line is like a fraction of a millimeter, 128 times. So it's laying down just a little bit every pass. And it allows it to build up. At a certain point, it seals the paper and builds the pigment up. But the other complexity is that because the papers are handmade, if I build a profile to print on a paper, every paper is different.
Right.
Different color, different tone. So when I'm working on the images, I have to keep that in mind. And I'm going, wait a minute, what am I printing on today? And adjust. There's just no way to be super scientific about it. It's a real gut instinct. I need this to transfer to work here. And color is a whole different ball as well. I did a lot of work on a mate in color. And that was a very complicated procedure because, you know, yellow of the paper makes blues go purple and all sorts of crazy stuff. And I found a way in 2005 to compensate for that and to be able to control it.
Great.
So, yeah. Somewhat. Any other questions? That's all.
Thank you.
This is
Yeah,
great.
thank you.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.